Global migration. Welcome to the second lesson of Module 3. In this lesson, we will talk about global migration and the reasons behind it. We will also learn the benefits and challenges of migration to both receiving and sending countries. Aside from that, we will also discuss the problem that global migration brings, such as human trafficking and the integration of migrants in the receiving countries. Lastly, we will see the movement of people in our country as one of the leading providers of workforce in the world. Intended learning outcomes. Identify the reasons for the migration of people. Explain why states regulate migration and discuss the effects of global migration on the economic well-being of states. The reason of migration of people. People migrate for many different reasons. These reasons can be classified as economic, social, political, or environmental. Economic migration, moving to find work or follow a particular career. Paticonic migration, moving to find work or allow a particular career path. Social migration, moving somewhere for a better quality of life or to be closer to family or friends. Political migration, moving to escape political persecution or war. Environmental causes of migration include natural disasters such as flooding. Introduction. This lesson we will look at global migration and its impact on both the sending and receiving countries. Although we will cite numerous challenges relating to migration, migration should not be considered a problem. There is nothing moral or immoral about moving from one country to another. Human beings have always been migratory. It is result of their movements that areas get populated communities, experience diversity and economies proper those rather than looking at migration in terms of contemporary globalization. Abstraction. Let us now start our formal discussion on global migration. What is migration? There are two types of migration. Internal migration, which refers to the people moving from one area to another within one country. Ang kaning internal nga mao ni siya ang paglalin o domestic migration mao ang paglalin sa tawo sulod sa usa ka nasod. Kaduha, international migration, in which people across borders of one country to another. The latter can be further broken down into five groups. First are those who move permanently to another country, immigrants. The second refers to the workers who stay in another country for a fixed period, at least 6 months in a year. Illegal migrants comprise the third group, while the fourth are migrants whose families have petitioned them to move to the destination country. The fifth group are refugees, also known as asylum seekers. Those unable or unwilling to return because of well-founded fear of persecution on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political. Kini siyang internal migration, usan siya kapag lalin may tabo kung ang mga tawo mutabok sa mga utlanan sa estado o magpabilin sa host state sa pipila ka minimum nga gidugayon sa panahon. Demographers state that 247 million people are currently living outside the countries of their birth. 90% of them moved for economic reasons, while the remaining 10% were refugees and asylum seekers. The top, there, the top three regions of origin are Latin America, 18% global total, followed by Eastern Europe and Central Asia, 16%, and the Middle East of the North Africa, 14%. On a per country basis, India, Mexico, and China are leading. The Philippines, together with Afghanistan, only ranking 6th in the world. The top 10 country destinations of these migrants are mainly in the West and the Middle East, with the United States topping the list. 50% of global migrants have moved from the developing countries to the developed zones of the world, and contribute anywhere from 40 to 80% of their labor force. Their growth has outstripped the population growth in the developed countries, 3% versus only 6.6%. Shots that today, according to the think tank Mikey Kinsey Global Institute, first-generation immigrants constitute 13% of the population in Western Europe, 15% in the North Africa, and 48% in the GCC countries. The majority of migrants remain in the cities. The percentage of the migrants in cities are 92 and 99% in Australia. Once settled, they contribute enormously to raising the productivity of their host countries. Table 1. Migrant contribution of destination country in the dollars and a percentage of national GDP 2015. Country United Country contribution percentage of GDP. United States contribution 2 billion, percentage of GDP 11%. Germany 550 billion, 17%. United Kingdom 390 billion, 14%. Australia 330 billion, 25%. Canada 320 billion, 21%. The migrant influx has led to a debate in destination countries over the issue of whether migrants are assessed or liabilities to national development. Anti-migrants groups of nationalists argue that governments must control legal migration and put a stop legal interests of foreigners. Many of these anti-immigrant groups are gaining influence through political leaders who share their beliefs. Examples include U.S. President Donald Trump and UK Prime Minister Theresa May, who have been reversing the existing pro-immigration and the refugee sympathetic policies of the United States of people from majority Muslim countries, even those with proper documentation. He also continues to speak about his election promise of building a wall between the United States of Mexico. The wisdom of the government action has been consistently believed by the data. The massive inflow of refugees from Syria and Iraq has raised alarm bells once again, but has not proved to be as damaging as expected. The International Monetary Fund predicted that the flow of refugees fleeing the war in Syria and Iraq would actually grow Europe modestly. benefits and determines for the second countries. Even if 90% of the value of the generated by migrant workers remains in their host countries, they have sent billions back to their home countries. In 2014, their remittance totaled 580 billion. In 2014, India held the highest recorded remittance, 70 billion, followed by China 62 billion, the Philippines 28 billion, and Mexico 25 billion. These remittances make significant contribution to the development of small and medium term industries that help generate jobs. Remittance likewise change the economic and social standing of migrants, as shown by new innovated homes and their relatives' access to new consumer goods. The purchasing power of a migrant's family doubles and makes it possible for children to start or continue their schooling. More importantly, global migration is simponing qualified personnel and removing dynamic young workers. This process has often been referred to as brain drain. According again to the McKinsey Global Institute, countries in sub-Saharan Africa and Asia have lost a third of their colleges graduates. 60% of those who moved to OECD destination were college graduates compared to just 9% of the overall population in the country. 52% of the Filipino who live for work in the developed world have tertiary education, which is more than double the 23% of the overall population. Governments are aware to this long-term handicap but have no choice but to continue promoting migrant work as part of state policy. Because of their remittance impact on GPD, they are equally concerned with generating jobs for an underutilized workforce and getting the maximum possible inflow of workers' remittance. Governments are those actively involved in the recruitment and development of work. Some of them get setting up special departments like the Bureau of Manpower, Employment and the Training in the Bangladesh, the Office of the Protector of Immigrants within the Indian Labor Ministry and the Philippine Overseas Employment Agency. The sustainability of migrants dependent economies will partially depend on the strength of this institution. The problem of human trafficking. On the top of the issue of brain drain, sending state must likewise protect migrant workers. The United States Federal Bureau of Investigation lists human trafficking as the third largest criminal activity worldwide. In 2012, the International Labour Organization identified 21 million men, women, and children as victims of forced labor and appealing 3 out of every 1,000 persons worldwide. 90% of the victims, 18.7 million, are exploited by private enterprises and entrepreneurs. 22% 5 million are sexually abused, and 14.2 million work under compulsion in agriculture, manufacturing, infrastructure, and domestic activities. Human trafficking has been very profitable. Earring syndicates, smugglers, and corrupt state official profits of high as 150 billion a year in 2014. Governments, the private sector, and the civil society groups have worked together to combat human trafficking, yet the result remain uneven. Integration. A final issue relates to how migrants interact with their new home countries. They may contribute significantly to a host nation GPD, but their access to housing, healthcare, and education is not easy. There is, of course, considerable variation in the economic integration of migrants. Migrants from China, India, and Western Europe often have more success, while those from the Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa face greater challenges in securing jobs. In the United States and Singapore, there are blue-collar as well as white-collar Filipino workers, doctors, engineers, even corporate executives, and it is the professional white-collar workers that have oftentimes been easier to integrate. Democratic states assimilate immigrants and their children by granting them citizenship and the rights that go with it, especially public education. However, without a solid support from their citizens, switching citizenship may have be a formality. Linguistic difficulties custom from the old country and of the differing religion may create cleavage between migrants and citizens of receiving countries, particularly in the West. The latter accuse migrants of bringing in the culture from their home countries and applying differences in the linguistic and ethnic costume. Conclusion: global migration entails the globalization of people, and like the border globalization process, it is uneven. Some migrants experience their movement as a liberating process. A highly educated professional may find moving to another country financially rewarding. At the other end, a victim of sex trafficking may view the process of migration disquieting and disempower. Yet, despite these various contradictions, it is clear that different forms of global interdependence will ensure that global migration will continue to be a one major issue in the contemporary world. Countries whose economies have become internally dependent on globalization and really on foreign labor to continue. Singapore, Saudi Arabia, and even workers protect as Japan will actively court foreign workers. Likewise, country like the Philippines with an abundance of labor and need for remittance will continue to send these workers.